issues. But I do a number of other things for the department. And one big role of mine is education. So I provide education and consultation to our physicians. I also help to train our pediatric residents in behavioral health matters so that our future pediatricians are up to speed on mental health issues. And then finally, I also provide education for community groups, nurses, schools, and parent groups, and the general public like tonight. And I'm really excited to present tonight's webinar because it's going to be a little different change of pace for me. Very often, when I'm talking about things that can be a little depressing at times. I'm highlighting mental health challenges in youth, which we all know are at a crisis point. But tonight, I figured I'd switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about what we can do to help children to develop skills to protect them against mental health challenges and to build up the resiliency. So I'm really pleased to be here tonight, and I thank you for being here. All right, so this is the school year, right? From September to June, we know the school year is stressful. Stressful on our kids, right? They have academic challenges. There's all kinds of social challenges get heightened during the school year. Very often, our kids are heavily involved in sports and extracurriculars. They really feel like they have to perform at the top-notch level as much as possible. Our teenagers are worried about getting into colleges, so they're trying to fill up those college applications with extracurriculars. Our younger people are often worried about completing homework and state testing. And it's not easy on families either. So, as parents and caregivers, you're often very busy during this time as well. You're running here, there, and everywhere. You're the chauffeur. Very often, you're also participating in some of your children's activities. You have to make sure that your kids are doing what they need to do to get through the school year. You have to be on top of homework and things like that. So it's a lot. So then summer finally rolls around. So finally a time when we can relax and we can really recuperate. But what tends to happen is this. So during the summertime, kids are so burnt out from the school year that they end up really not doing much of anything over the summer. They can become listless, they can become bored, and they're just spending so much time trying to recuperate that there's no real meaningful activity that really gives them a boost that's going to really truly help them to build resiliency and to recuperate from the previous year's stress. So then we're right back at it. And so September rolls around, and yes, the break was nice in some respects, but basically we're right where we started in regards to our mental health. And that's what I want to help to change. I really want to help to stop being so reactive to mental health challenges and start being a bit more proactive and really focusing. Of course, we need to address behavioral health challenges and mental health challenges as they occur. But I really want to also focus on what we can do when we're feeling good, what we can do when we have that free time. What are some of the skills that we can build? What are some of the other resources and supports that we can build? Okay. And that's really the challenge, how to take advantage of summer as a time of both relaxation and as a time to build up on positive mental health habits. Now, in the spirit of this, I'm going to go over several areas that we can work on, but give yourselves a break, right? You want to pick one or two areas to work on. Change happens best when you have concrete, attainable goals. And if you can work on one or two skill areas or one or two areas of focus, if you can get those down, that's a really great basis for then introducing additional change. Just like any other kinds of changes that we make in our lives, whether we're trying to improve our nutrition or if we're trying to improve our physical activity, it's the same thing when it comes to mental health, addressing mental health challenges. Work on one or two things that you can really get down pat, and then you build from there. Okay, so I'm going to take these one area at a time. And the first area that I really want to work on, or have you think about working on, is that summer is a great time to get balance back in your schedules. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, during the school year, very often we don't have very much time in our schedule. We have very little free time. In fact, very often we have negative time. We don't have enough time to do all the things that we really want to do, or really even sometimes what we really need to do. But then what tends to happen during the summertime is now we have too much time. And so what I find is that kids go from being over busy to being under busy. And that's not good either. So not having activity, not having some meaningful activity planned throughout your days and your weeks and the couple of months of summer is also not good for mental health. So, but with summer, at least we don't usually have to worry about being overwhelmed. So what we can do is start to work to build into our schedules some routines that are really going to work for us in a positive way. All right. So why don't we have free time? What has happened to our free time? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of activities going on, and so kids don't have a lot of free time because of that. Or what I should say is that they don't have a lot of unsupervised free time. Dr. Gray is a developmental psychologist, and he really did a lot to bring forth this concept that very often what's been happening recently is that even when kids have so-called free time, it's not really free because it's very structured, it's very goal-oriented, and very often adults are there and they're right in the thick of it. So kids don't have the opportunity to really have truly free play where they can be creative and figure things out on their own. One area that this certainly seems to apply that I've seen over the last maybe 10 to 15 years, but especially recently, probably in the last maybe the last 8 years, is the focus has shifted to for sports. It's shifted to specialization. So kids no longer play a number of different sports; they specialize in the sport, and so the sports are year round. The practices are year round, and the games or matches are year round as well. And don't get me wrong, for a kid that has passion for a sport, this can be a great thing, but it can also present some challenges. On a physical level, this can result in overuse injury because you're just pounding the same areas over and over again. You're putting stress on the same physical areas of your body. But it can also have challenges in regards to mental health, and that kids don't get that variety and they can just burn out on an activity. Okay. Outside of sports, there's other extracurricular activities as well that can be very demanding. So whether it's musical pursuits or theater, kids often feel pressure to do a lot of different things. And as I mentioned earlier, part of that reason is they feel that they need to. They feel like they really need to, for example, to make it look good on a college application. That's probably one of the number one reasons. Or they feel that peer pressure because their friends are doing things as well. And again, there's nothing wrong with doing activity. That's a very good thing. In sports and extracurricular activities have many great mental health benefits. But if you're trying to fit in a whole bunch, then sometimes that can rob you of the joy that those activities can give you. And also in regards to that unsupervised free time, what's happened over the last 20 years is that there's huge concerns for safety. And these, don't get me wrong, these are legitimate concerns. So having your kid go out and play in the neighborhood can be very daunting for parents and caregivers, unless they're really quite on the older side of their teenage years. And as I mentioned, that's changed a lot. When I was a kid, they actually had to have TV commercials reminding our parents that it was time for us to come in. I don't know if anybody here is old enough to remember, but the ad was, "It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?" I think I've seen some memes going around on the internet, so many of you may know of this. And it was true, and because you got home, you did your homework, and that was it. The door got open, you ran outside, and you played. And so a couple of things have changed that. Number one is the advent of video games and then these things. But number two is that concern for for physical safety. And the only thing that I would question about that, again, I certainly understand the concern for safety, but we're willing to leave our kids home in front of a computer unsupervised, but we're not willing to let them play in the neighborhood unsupervised. And to some extent, that doesn't quite make sense because there are many dangers when you're sitting in front of the computer as well. So watching our kids in both realms is a good idea to some extent, but I think we need to get the balance back in regards to that. Okay. All right. So how do we get our balance back? Well, first of all, I think it's really important to understand that there are certainly individual differences, right? I've seen that in my own kids. I have 3 children. They're young adults now, but one liked a lot of activity or likes a lot of activity, thrives on it, right? So there are those kids that just they can be in everything and they absolutely it just brings them out. There are other kids that need a lot of downtime. Okay, um, they'll do things, but then afterwards they need to rest, they need to recuperate. They can't have too many things going on at once. And there are kids that are obviously somewhere in the middle. Okay, and they need a little bit of activity, but they can get overwhelmed. And again, I've seen that in my own kids. You may find that in yours as well. So be attuned to those individual differences. Well, how do you know? Well, you look to your kids for signs with regard to whether or not they're being under or over scheduled. So if your kid is running around from activity to activity and they start to seem listless, tired, if they just seem to have lost their passion for things, especially if they previously had passion for it, that's a really good sign that they probably need to cut back on some things, or they need to rethink how many things that they're doing. Okay, but over the summer we want to watch out for signs that you're being under scheduled. So again, maybe that first week, yeah, we're going to cut them a break, and we're going to cut ourselves a break because we really need it. But after that, if your kid's just kind of waking up and I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know. I don't want to do anything. And even if you're presenting really viable options for them, things that they would usually really get excited over, and like, I don't want to do that. I don't know. That's often a sign that they don't have enough activity. Okay. So look to your kids for cues. So what do we do over the summer? And I know everybody's situation here is a bit different. Some of you may have your kids in camps, for example. But for those days that you don't have scheduled activity, I often advise having at least one thing each day to do. Okay. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be expensive, but have one activity each day and do it somewhat early in the day. Not super early where you all have to wake up super early because that's going to defeat the purpose, but somewhat early after you get ready and have your breakfast and get dressed, have something to do. It could be this is the day we go to the library. This is the day we go to a museum. This is the day we're going to paint your room. Whatever it is, have one identified activity that can kind of set the tone for the day. And then another thing is important too is allow your kids to get a little bored. All right. It's important to allow that to happen. Very often now, unfortunately, very often they fill that time with screens. And I know I've given this example in a previous webinar, but one time we went on vacation. We were really in the backwoods of Maine, so much so that there was no internet connection. I struggled with it, but my kids started to do things. They started to go down to the river. They started to fish. They started to go nature watching. And at one point, my youngest, who at the time was, I don't know, maybe like around 11, he turns to me and he says, you know, Dad, I really like this vacation. It forces us to do things. It forces us to do things that we wouldn't normally do. Okay. Just this week, I had a young lady I was working with. And when I work with kids, after we do our talking and our activities, counseling activities, if there's time, I have free time for the kids. And they can choose a game to do, or what some kids choose to do is they choose to look up stuff on YouTube. And if it's appropriate, I'll allow it. But in this case, this young lady wanted to look at something that just wasn't appropriate. I just didn't like the vibe of it. So I said, no, no, let's do something else. And she put on a face, and I got all kinds of glares, and you could really feel that she was very upset about it. Within about 10 seconds after she put on the face and everything, after about 10 seconds, she says, you know what? You still got that dinosaur set? At this dinosaur play set here. I don't know if you can see that. It's fading into the background. And she started playing with that. And she loved it. And she was creative, and it was just a nice, wholesome feeling. So your kids, give them some time first to find things to do. And if they can't, you can give gentle suggestions. And then if they really can't, then you plan stuff. Okay. So kind of look at it in a graded way. But please don't be too tempted to just fill it with screens. And I know that's easier said than done, trust me. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, we want to allow for some adult-free spaces. This is within a reasonable extent. Obviously, if you have young children, you want to keep eyes on it. But what you can do is you can do that distant. So have some distant supervision where you're at the playground, you can see your kids, but let them be at the playground. And if you see something going on, maybe interpersonally with the other kids, resist the temptation to jump in right away to solve problems, okay? Unless there's obvious physical danger going on or obviously emotional abuse going on. Kids need to learn to work out conflicts. Kids need to learn to solve problems. And so as adults, if we keep jumping in there, and I know the temptation is great, I'm guilty of that myself, but if we keep jumping in there, our kids aren't going to learn. So let's find some time to really let our kids be kids, okay? Now, what to do about camp or vacations? If your kids go to camp, they may not have a lot of choice in regards to how much activity they do. So if first of all, be aware of your kid when choosing a camp. I know it's already too late for that. I believe a lot of camps they start like around January and February. I'm not sure what's available, but certainly for you to think about in future, you want to try to match a camp's vibe with your kid's kind of personality. And if there's a lot going on and the kid has no choice, and your kid likes a slower pace, that might not be a good fit. Or talk to the camp about your kid if they need some of that space, and encourage them to be aware of your kid's need for that and to problem solve around that. And of course, you can also talk with your child about that. So if they go to camp, what you can do if you start to feel overwhelmed, you can talk to a counselor. And you can mention that, hey, we spoke with the camping staff. They said certainly you can take breaks as you need to. Just prepare for it, okay? And vacations too. So with vacations, sometimes we approach our vacations in a way that we need a vacation from our vacation. And don't get me wrong, it's good to plan. And I know in most families, one of the caregivers going on the vacation is going to be the super planner. You kind of need this to some extent, but again, you want to seek some balance there. Okay. So having one main thing to do during the day is absolutely fine, but you don't want to be in a position where you're running around from activity to activity because your kids aren't going to get anything out of it. You're going to be spending a lot of your energy supervising all the little things that go along with being on vacation with kids. So just keep that in mind too. Okay. All right. Where are we at? There we go. All right. So that's getting balance. All right. Summer is also a great time to develop good sleep habits, right? So sleep problems, I see this so often in my practice. I have many more of my kids have problems sleeping than sleep well, okay? And the research bears this out, where 8% of high school students get the recommended amount of sleep. Some 23% get 6 hours of sleep on an average school night, and 10% only get 5 hours. Recommended for teens 13 to 18 is 8 to 10, and recommended for ages 6 to 12 is 9 to 12 hours of sleep in a 24-hour basis. Okay, we know a lot of our kids don't get this. Why is that? Well, first of all, there are some hormonal changes going on in kids, and there's changes in the brain too that happen during the teenage years. You can see from that curve that the adolescent brain wants to go to bed later, and it wants to wake up later. And I know those of you who have teenagers, you don't need a chart to believe this. We see it, right, with our kids going to bed very late, and certainly during the weekend waking up very late as well. The problem is that schedules, especially school schedules, don't align with this. And yes, there's been some things done to help with this, where some schools have implemented later start times, but sometimes that just kind of pushes everything forward. So now the kids getting home later, they got to do more homework a little bit later. And also, even with those late start times, sometimes it's still not quite enough for so they got to do all that catch up sleep on the weekends. It just throws off the whole system. And of course, being overscheduled um, can make it difficult to get to sleep at night because you're doing things at night. And stress and anxiety, as we all know, can also make it difficult to sleep. All right, so I'm just going to go over some basic sleep hygiene rules. One thing you want to do, encourage your teen or your child to do, is go to bed about the same time every night and wake up about the same time every day. Okay, this is easy to do over the summer because we don't have those changing schedules. So you want to start to work towards that pattern. I know it's going to be a hard sell with your kids. Come on, it's summertime. So be reasonable about it. Okay, so if your teen wants to stay up until 2 a.m., encourage 12 midnight. Okay, even that little bit will help to prevent the challenges that they will face in September if they are going to bed 2 to 3 a.m. during the summertime. So wherever your kid is at in terms of their age, try to reasonably get it back to what will be an approximation of what they will need to do during the school year. Okay. Now, wake up time is important too, because that will set the clock, get you up, get that daylight that you need to set your circadian rhythm. And so that when nighttime comes around, you're going to be more likely to be tired and really go to bed. Avoid long naps. So I've seen this a lot with teenagers where to make up for their sleep deficit, they'll come home from school and crash, and they may go to sleep for an hour. The problem with that is it completely messes up their sleep-wake cycle. So then they're up till 2 a.m. that night, and the whole process starts again. Cat naps are fine, but long naps are not. Routines help. A routine that takes you from high activity to lower activity. So yes, your kids may be playing video games, but then do something like reading, taking a shower, things that will really kind of bring their energy level down. And caffeine. Caffeine has a very long half-life. And the recommendation is do not have any caffeine 6 hours before you intend to go to sleep. And we know for kids, it's not necessarily coffee that we have to worry about because now we have energy drinks. And those energy drinks have a very high level of caffeine in them. And they're very popular amongst kids. So really you want to educate your kids and be careful about that. And then electronics. So no electronics before bedtime. Research shows that screens will affect the production of melatonin, which is a hormone that helps to regulate our sleep cycles. And the recommendation is to stop screen times at least an hour before bedtime. I think it's a good recommendation. And please, no electronics in bed. I cannot tell you how many times I heard kids say, "I didn't sleep last night." Well, why not? I was playing games on my phone. Oh, what time? Oh, yeah, 3 a.m. Or I was texting. I got caught in group chat at 2 or 3 a.m. It's like, no, don't do that. Just please get the phone out of the bed, okay? Or other electronics as well. I recommend getting them out of the bedroom because you want your bedroom to be associated with sleep. But we pick our battles, right? and get that daylight exposure. So if you're out and you're getting sunlight, that's really going to help to set that clock. All right, and then you want to consider a comfortable sleep environment. Consider lighting. Make sure the lights are down, especially that electronic light. You want it to be cool. You want it to be relaxing. I know for myself, it's such a narrow window that I can sleep well in. 69 degrees is my ideal. 70s, okay. 71, if I'm tired enough, I sleep. 72, forget it. I'm not going to sleep. So that can really make a difference. Our bodies naturally lower. Our bodies actually lower the temperature of the body at nighttime, and so when we lower our cooling in our rooms, in our environment, it helps to match what our body's doing, and that helps us to get a better sleep. All right. So, and again, sleep is really, really important. And just one more thing that I didn't put on the slide. If you have a kid that's sleeping in the bed and they're getting a little bit too old for that, summer's a good time to work on that. Just make sure you work on that kind of early in the summer, because it can take a while to get that under control. Comfort your child in their own bed, and then when they fall asleep, then you want to withdraw to your own bed. So both for the sake of your kid and for your sake, yeah, doing that over the summertime is a good idea time wise. Okay. All right. What else do we got? Oh, this is a big one. Summer is a great time to reduce reliance on electronics. Okay. I did an entire webinar on this not that long ago. I'm going to put the link in the resource page. You're all going to be getting a copy of this presentation. So the link for that will be right there for you. Okay. But it's such an important topic that I thought I'd briefly mention it here as well. All right, what's the problem with screens? So almost half of all teenagers spend at least 4 hours per day on screen. Okay, it's a very high amount of time. That's on average, right? And compares to around 2.5 hours for the general population, which isn't great either. But 4 hours is a lot of time. So what can screens do? Well, first of all, as I mentioned already, it can affect sleep 2 ways. Number one, it affects that melatonin production because you got the screens. And number two, people are online instead of sleeping. Okay. Number two, it can affect attention and performance. It can make it difficult for kids to focus. There's research showing this, and it can also affect academic performance. It can lead to social isolation. It depends partly on the kid and partly on how they use it. So if you got a kid, they're playing games by themselves, or they go online on social media, but they're just scrolling, we call that a passive user. It can contribute and exacerbate their social isolation, versus those kids that use electronics more actively to enhance their connection to the real life social connections. Okay, so partly depends on how they use it, but it can certainly exacerbate those social isolation. It can impact on physical fitness. It can contribute to things like obesity, for example, and it can contribute to overuse injuries. So much so that we have new vocabulary now. We have things called gamer's thumb and text claw that describe some of the joint pain and inflammation that happens when we use electronics too often. Okay, social media has some particular dangers associated with it. First of all, there's risky behaviors, things like the viral challenges that you may have heard of. TikTok is known for this, but it's also on other platforms as well. Really ridiculous things like the Tide Pod challenge, the Benadryl challenge, take as many Benadryls as you can, and then log in your experience, blacking out, forcing yourself to black out. Some kids have really gotten hurt and even unfortunately died as a result of some of these challenges. So that's a real big problem to watch out for. Vulnerability to predators. The FBI estimates that daily there are up to 500,000 sexual predators online that are scouring profiles, and they're looking for kids to victimize. Very scary stuff out there, and unfortunately, it seems like every week or two we hear about another case on the news. Social media can impact self-esteem. So teens, when you're developing teen, how you're viewed by your peers is crucial. And so teens, they're judging themselves based on social media presence, how many likes they get, if they're friended or unfriended, whatever the equivalent is, the app that they're using. All that stuff can really do damage to a fragile self-esteem. And there's the impact on body image. And research shows that the more time teens spend on social media, the more likely they are to report being dissatisfied with how they look. And as I mentioned in the webinar that I did, many times social influencers are using filters to make themselves look unrealistically beautiful or handsome according to society standards. And teens themselves are often using these filters as well. So it really does some damage to somebody's body image. And there's online bullying, and this can happen in many different forms. Certainly, hurtful comments can be made. Also, people's accounts can be hacked into. And then perhaps the worst form of this is videotaping live bullying and then posting it online and really embarrassing the kid. It's a real problem. And again, it seems like every week or two you hear about another case of serious online bullying that unfortunately has led to some young people taking their own lives. It's a really horrendous problem. And social media can contribute to and accelerate mental health challenges. Research shows that it depends partly on how people use it, but it certainly doesn't do, if you have a mental health condition, excessive use of social media often does more harm. All right, so what can parents do about this? I'm just doing a time check here. So certainly use restriction. As parents, we have the right, and we certainly, for younger kids, we have the obligation to set parameters on how our kids use social media and electronics in general, or if they use it. I recommend introducing those limits early, right? And make access to things like phones and apps, make it contingent upon your child's responsibility. And let them know that you can take that back if they don't show that responsibility. Okay. Certainly, you want to set parameters around important activities like sleep, meals during the school year, schoolwork. You want to have electronic free time for your kids and for your family. And again, vacation's a great time for that. Say, hey, when we go out to eat, guys, let's keep the phones away, okay? Or if you're going to a museum or something, let's all agree to keep the phones away, unless you're going to snap a picture and put it right back in your pocket. Okay. And in general, you want to do non-electric activities together as a family, and you want to show your kids that you're participating in this too. Electronics are a problem for all of us, and we all have to contend with this. So you want to show your kids that you want to lead by example. And you want to set up restricted and parent modes as well. Again, you got to be careful with this, but there are ways that you can do this. Individual apps sometimes will have certain ways you can do this. There's also specific systems that you can purchase that are designed to help parents monitor use of electronics, and things like phones will sometimes have things for free that you can also use. All right, as I said earlier, you want to be a role model. If you're constantly on your phone, on social media, checking emails all the time, your kid's going to pick up on that, or may make you seem like a hypocrite. So always have to be aware of that. Be aware of what your kids are using and the potential dangers. So if a kid I'm working with tells me they're using a certain game, I'll look it up just to kind of make sure it's kind of cool for them. And you may even download stuff just to take a look at it. So for the last webinar, I downloaded TikTok because it was talking a lot about it. So let me at least take a look at this. And I don't know, what was it, like a half an hour or whatever. I uninstalled it from my phone. It just was just horrific what I saw. And so at least you want to have some knowledge of it. Okay. There is a website called commonsensemedia.org that's going to be on the resource page. They review games, they review apps. So they're really good at helping parents to understand what kids are using. And get a dialogue going, don't wait till you think there's a problem before you ask your children, what's going on? What are you doing on that? I saw what you were doing, because that's automatically going to put them into a defensive mode. You want to talk about electronics, you want to talk about social media from the second your kids start using it, before they start using it. Okay, we need to talk about this, and keep that dialogue going so the conversation seems natural. And if your kids have questions, they will tell you. I find that a lot of the kids I work with, they know more about security issues. They know more about some of the problems I mentioned earlier than we do. So they'll often tell me, "Oh, that app's horrible. Don't go on that." So sometimes I learn things from the kids I work with, as well as my own kids. I'll pick their brain about that as well. And you want to teach your kids to understand how social media companies use them. The last thing a kid, especially a teenager, wants to think is that they've been taken advantage of by an adult. So I tell kids, hey, they're using things to get you. They're using algorithms. They're using the concept of intermittent reinforcement to keep you on longer than you really want to be. So watch out for that. All right. So I can go on and on about that. I do recommend that you look more into dangers of social media. You may want to check out my webinar as a resource for that. All right, summer is a great time to discover the power of nature. Okay. All right, so I've always been an outdoors kind of person. So I know that the outdoors really helps my own mental health, and I've certainly seen it in the kids, my own children, and in the kids that I work with. And there's research showing that being out in nature can increase psychological well-being. Does this in a number of different ways. First of all, it's what you're not doing. You're not on screens, but also there is some links to increases in serotonin, which is a feel-good chemical in our brain. And as I mentioned earlier, that sunlight can also help with sleep. The Japanese have a term for this that translates into roughly forest bathing, and there's been a lot of talk about this lately and movement around that, getting out into nature, and I support it 1,000%. And there's even research showing that being out in nature can improve our kids' cognitive development, our memory, and our attention. All right, so what do we do? Well, when we're out in nature, well, research shows that both green and blue spaces are beneficial. Green being trees, grass, that sort of thing, and blue being water-based places. Okay. Research also shows that remote and biodiverse environments seem to have the greatest impact on our feelings of well-being. But any exposure to nature is better than none. So it's great when you can get out to these places. We can't always do that, but even going and sitting in the backyard for a little bit, or here when I'm at work, we have a lovely little garden on the side here. I will sometimes go to. Sometimes I'll take the kids I'm working with out there. Any exposure is better than none. You might want to have an outdoor sit spot where your kid can go and read, and when they're outdoors, and they can make it kind of personalized, so they really feel like, hey, this is my spot where I can be at peace and observe things. And basically, just think of a lot of verbs: hike, explore, observe, collect, experiment, grow. All of these things can help. What helps is whatever you do, make it easy and fun. Turn it into a game, especially for younger kids. Be creative, and as I mentioned earlier, you want to lead by example. Show your kids how you can take advantage of nature as well. And being a steward for wildlife really helps too. So feeding wildlife, setting up a bird bath. You got things called bug hotels where you can make it where you attract either pollinators or beneficial insects to your backyard or garden. Kids love that sort of thing, and it really gets them immersed in it. So I highly recommend. There's so many things. I mean, just do a quick search online. There's all kinds of blogs out there about this: rock gardening, nature, scavenger hunts, camping in the backyard, even if it's just during the day. That's fun. Kids love that. It's so much, such an adventure. I'm making a nature bracelet. So I tried this today. I went out. I got out right before the storms came. It's actually, I think it's nice again. But hopefully you can see this. This is I made a bracelet here, going in and out there, but I made a bracelet with a leaf on it, 4-leaf clover. There's a little flower, there's a little stone on it, and it's supposed to, I made it with masking tape with the sticky side out. And there, now I got it. Now I got a nice bracelet. Wear this. When I get stressed, I can take a look at it, and it makes me think of the outdoors. Making bird feeders, kids love that sort of thing. So many things you can do with arts and crafts, seashells, rocks, and animal tracking trap. Kids love the idea of looking at animal tracks and figuring out what was there. And if you get like just even like 2 foot by 2 foot, not even 1 foot by 1 foot might help. Area that you can make either wet dirt or make it just a little bit muddy if animals are coming to your backyard or to a playground or an area outside that you have access to. They make the tracks in there, and you can see those tracks pretty clearly, and then you can go and you can identify that. All kinds of fun things to do. Okay, just do another time check here. Okay, summer is a great time to develop social skills and connections. Now, I work with kids who have developmental issues, particularly kids on the autism spectrum. And I find that during the school year, social interactions are very hard to control. It's very overwhelming for a lot of the kids I work with because it's very crowded, it's very unpredictable. So sometimes over the summer, we have the opportunity to somewhat engineer or set up situations that our kids would be more likely to be successful. Not trying to contradict what I said earlier about leaving kids alone, but sometimes kids who need a little extra help need us to set up that environment for them. All right. So be aware that different kids are going to be different in terms of how they socialize and what their comfort level is. A lot of the kids I work with do better in smaller groups with some structure. So there's all kinds of things available during the summer where a kid can go to a class, and maybe they can do like a coding class or some kind of outdoor group for a day where it's maybe a little bit smaller, a little bit more intimate than maybe some of those larger camps. And again, you got to think about your kid because you can go anywhere from single occasion events to weeks-long residential camps to day camps. Depends on your kid's age. It depends upon the resources and what you want as a parent as well, okay? Don't micromanage social interactions, as I said earlier, but you do want to provide prompts and cues and debriefs. So, for example, if your kid like Spider-Man will say, and you're in a playground, you see another kid about their age, they have a Spider-Man T-shirt on, say, "Oh, look at that kid likes Spider-Man. Why don't you ask him or her if they saw the latest movie?" And then if afterwards, "Hey, did you talk to that kid about Spider-Man?" Just to kind of give them some ideas about how they can make those connections. If your child needs that, some kids don't. All right. And summer is a great time to learn and practice relaxation skills, exercises. It can be really hard learning relaxation skills when you're overwhelmed. Okay. And during the school year, kids are so overwhelmed and saying, "Oh, just take a deep breath." I mean, like, what does that mean? It's like being in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean and giving somebody one oar. Okay, make your way back to shore. But summer, we got a little bit more space. That's a great time to master these skills so that when stress does hit, it's going to be more automatic for us, easier for us to implement. All right, so deep breathing is a great one, and I know kids will sometimes say, "Oh, what's the big deal?" Or I tried that, but a deep relaxation breath can at least take your anxiety down a little bit. So I'd say to kids, listen, if your anxiety is from 0 to 10, if taking a few deep breaths gets you down from 8 to 6, that's a good thing. So this may not cure it, but it's going to at least help. So the classic deep breath is called abdominal breathing, and I'm going to show you that. The idea is that typically in this, you breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, you breathe out slowly. But what you want to do is you want to lower the diaphragm muscle so that your lungs expand. And so what will happen is your belly will expand out. It's not that you're sticking your stomach out, but it's going to naturally expand because your lungs are expanding. You're getting in a lot of good oxygen. So I'm going to back up, and hopefully you can see this. So I'm gonna breathe in through my nose and then out through my mouth. Now, if you want to try this, here's what you do. You take a hand, you put one hand on your chest area, one hand right over your belly button. And to do this, when you take in that deep breath, I want you to try to let the diaphragm drop so that your stomach will expand. Try that now. And then hold and then blow out slowly. And when you blow out slowly, the hands should go a little bit inward towards your body. Just try it a couple more times here. In, hold, and out. One more time. Okay. There's plenty of videos online if you want to check it out. You just do a search for either deep breathing or diaphragmatic breathing. What I sometimes do with kids is, I don't have a spoon handy, but I'll have a spoon and I'll hold it here and I'll have them blow on it slowly. They smell it first. They pretend it's like delicious hot chocolate. They smell it and then they blow on it to cool it off. That's a great way to teach younger kids diaphragmatic breathing. Okay. All right. Progressive muscle relaxation. So when we get tense and we get nervous, our muscles tense up. And we're all different. Some of us get in our shoulders. I often get in my jaw area. Some people get really tense in their chest area, and some people get tense in their back. Even the legs can be anywhere. So what progressive muscle relaxation does is you tense your muscles and you think about that, and then you relax your muscles and you really think about what that feels like to be relaxed. Okay. I'm going to give you some examples to keep our legal team happy. Don't do anything if it hurts, and stop immediately. Okay. So you want to pretend that you have a lemony in your let's do both hands just in the interest of time, in both hands. Now squeeze those lemons. Hold it. Hold it. Feel the tension all throughout your hands and arms, and then drop the lemon. And then really let those muscles feel loose, calm, and relaxed. Okay? Do it one more time. Squeeze those lemons, squeeze them tight, hold it, and then drop them. Let them feel nice, loose, and relaxed. Okay? Let's do one more. So for younger kids, they like to do like animal pose. So I tell kids, let's pretend that we're a lazy furry cat. We want to stretch out. So we go out, go up like this, feel the shoulders pull up, and then you relax. And that should really feel relaxed in your neck area, your shoulder area, as well as your arms. One more time now. Up, stretch higher, and then relax. Okay. There are, again, videos on that. There's plenty of scripts out there for this. If you're working with a therapist, if your kid has anxiety, they might want to do this as well. Two good strategies to relax your body. Then we have strategies for the mind. You can do imagery where we imagine things. Could be that you're at the beach. Could be that you're in the mountains. Any place that you find to be peaceful. There's loads of scripts online. And meditation. Meditation could be repeating a word or a phrase, or what they call mindful meditation, which is don't focus on anything, but just kind of let things kind of come and go out of your consciousness. Don't react to them. Just observe them. And there's activities that combine both. Yogas and Tai Chi are two really good examples of that. So with things like yoga and Tai Chi, you're working on breathing, you're working on muscle relaxation. Very often there's a meditative component to it. These can be great practices. And I know like during the summertime, like you'll often see this down at the beach. It might be great, to do with your kids. And as another technique would be journaling. Journaling might be a great thing to start over the summer when kids have time. It's just a great way to get your thoughts and feelings out on paper so that you get a little distance from your worries and your thoughts. And then that way you feel that they are more manageable. All right, so to conclude, summer should certainly be a time for relaxation and recuperation. Don't get me wrong, but it's also a good time to build habits and skills that will help your child to manage stress throughout the year. I'm going to give you some resources. There's some books there, The Rescheduled Child, Best Hikes in New Jersey, et cetera, et cetera. Some websites there for you. And there, as I mentioned earlier, is my webinar on social media. These are my resources if you have kids with neurodevelopmental concerns. I've written 2 books. One are relaxation skills. It's a manual for the kids, and the other is specifically for the parents. They're available from Future Horizons or on Amazon. And then that's Atlantic Behavioral Health's resource page. I think I'm going to leave it on that. I want to wish you a great summer. I'm going to leave it right there as we go to Q&A. Perfect time. Okay, great.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. That was an amazing presentation and very informative. We do have one question as of right now.
Okay.
My son gets really upset when school ends. What are coping skills or things I can tell him to help him cope?
Oh, okay. All right, good. You usually hear it the other way around, but I've seen that before too. So for one thing is certainly to prepare for it, to be aware. School is a transition. So some kids have problems with transitions. And even if we're transitioning from something that from one thing that might create a lot of tension and stress to something enjoyable, people sometimes have problems with that. So one way to help with the transition is to be prepared for it. So talking about it, not overdoing it. You don't want to create more anxiety by over talking about it, but maybe around March, start to talk about what you're going to be doing over the summertime. Start to talk about what's going to happen at the end of the school year. Very often there are concrete events that can anchor your child. So it's like, okay, we have the band concert, we have the school play, then the band concert, then we have field day, then we have the class trip. Give them little stepping stones along the way, and that will help to ease their transition into the summertime. And then thinking about next year. So, and really being positive about the following year, about what they can expect in the grade, the next grade that you're going into.
That's great. Thank you. Somebody else wants to know how much screen time is okay for 11 and 12-year-olds.
Well, the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, used to put a time on this. They used to give very specific answers for this, like 2 hours or something like that. And for that age, 1 to 2 hours is probably a good ballpark figure. But what I would say is what the AAP did is they've changed it to saying it depends. I know it's a real great answer, right? But it depends on what your kid's using screen time for. And I've seen with kids, some screen time can be very productive. Some is not. So it depends on the quality of what they're looking at. So don't just look at the overall time. Yes, you could do that, and you should do that, but also look at what they're doing. So one thing to look out for is, kids always tell me this. They always say, tell your audiences this. You want to look out for short form content. That's stuff that is very brief. Kids find that they tend to lose time when they're doing that, and they keep scrolling through things. Long form content is like watching like a long video. That is a little bit different. It tends to have a little bit more substance in it. Be careful. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's something out there now that the kids call brain rot. And what that is that YouTube, they create these videos that are cartoonish, but they're just absurd, and they don't really have any meaning or plot to them. But it's things that are rapidly changing, and it just keeps kids stuck on it. So it partly depends upon what they're watching. But I would think 11 to 12-year-old depends on the obviously on your child and what you want. But 1 to 2 hours I think is reasonable.
We have two more questions. The first one is, you spoke about importance of free playtime. How can I, as a parent, help my children's school administrators understand that when they actually decrease free playtime for children?
Oh, that's a really good, that's a good issue to bring up. Because yeah, no, absolutely, free playtime is very important, and we find that it's shrinking, right? We find that things like recess, they're cutting back on lunch hours sometimes. It's really important for kids to grow, and it's an important part of the learning process. Also, it's important that kids have those breaks so that they can learn. I know here at work, if I'm doing something that really takes a lot of mental power, afterwards, I'll just do a brief walk. I have to kind of decompress a little bit, and that actually helps me cognitively to do it. So I'm not exactly sure. Hopefully, there are school administrators watching this, so that is certainly something to do. You certainly can bring it up, but get involved with your school. If you get involved with the PTA or other parenting groups, that you have a voice, and that will help to make a difference.
And the last question is, any tips getting a child to relax or unwind on their own? She is 8 and on the spectrum.
Yeah, no, very important. So sometimes you want to almost look at it as a transition. So sometimes kids need us to first calm them down, right? So sometimes they need us to guide them through things. But ultimately, we want them to learn coping skills that they can implement. Because number one, we're not always going to be there. You may be very good at seeing when your child is getting upset, and those signs, and you can jump in and intervene. But not everybody's going to be as good as you are at that. And ultimately, we want kids to develop their own stress and anxiety management skills. It's going to give them a sense of control over their environment, and it's going to help them to problem solve on their own. So teach them, teach them those strategies. As I mentioned, my manual talks about all that stuff. You don't have to buy my manual, but there's other stuff out there for kids learning on the spectrum to help them learn stress and anxiety management skills. It's a skill, and it needs to be taught. And when it comes to the spectrum, we have to work on generalization. What I mean by that is, I'll teach a kid a relaxation skill here, and then they'll go and maybe something will happen at lunchtime. And I said, well, did you try your muscle relaxation that we talked about? Oh, you didn't tell me to do that there. So we got it. When you're teaching your kid, make sure that you're teaching them that they can apply it in many different settings and scenarios. So when you're teaching those skills, be very specific. If they're on the spectrum, be very specific about when and how they can apply. Okay.
Thank you again, Dr. Lynch. There's no more questions, so we do want to remind everyone that this webinar will be sent out. And I think we are good to end it now. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Great questions. Thank you all.